Everybody get their paper tape down. I think we're just going to do around the outside today. And I can't remember, did anybody ever get a larger pack of oil pastels? Do we talk about that at all? Because if you decide you want to do like florals or even more sunset type things, the 12-piece set, the hardest color I have found that is not in that set that I want to make and is what I have the hardest time using is purple or a violet, anything, and even a really good pink. And so even the Pastels are really a pretty good brand, and they're pretty reasonable. So even, I think there's a 16-piece set, and there's 24, and there's I have a 48-piece set that has a lot of great colors in it. So the Pastels brand is a really well-known artist brand of supplies, so that's a pretty good quality one. And also I do like the Sakura, it's called Cray Paz or Cray Paz. It's they call them combination crayons and pastels or something like that. Yeah, that Cindy's holding up hers, if you can see it on the gallery view, and that was a 25-piece. And does that have some pinks and purples in it? Yeah, there. So you can see her colors in there. There's a couple, a deeper purple and a violet and some other things. So even going to a 25-piece set, if you like this and want to do more, it just offers you a little bit more variety in the colors you have to work with. So I do like working with a small number of colors and just kind of challenging myself to see what I can do with it. But sometimes it's nice. There's just those couple little things that are kind of missing. So today, I'm going to have to move my camera up a little bit. Hang on a second. I thought we would do another iconic Winona view. So Lake Winona viewing Sugar Loaf, and since Winona is that goofy town where the Mississippi River doesn't run from north to south, it runs from west to east. The sun actually comes up on the east end of town, which if you're standing on Huff Street on the bridge area, it's looking towards Sugar Loaf. So more of a sunrise than a sunset. And a lot of times when you look at pictures of sunrises, they aren't quite as vibrant and awesome and colorful as sunsets. So I kind of just did this one with a big cloud that had some shadows and stuff and kind of the glow to it. So I also have another device sitting here next to me, and this was just a photo I found online of a sunset over water, and so you can kind of see where the sun reflects on the water and add some more colors in that. So I'm kind of also using that as a reference today for some ideas. And I also liked the clouds in this one because the clouds here up at the top, you can see that there must be a shadow on the cloud from a lower cloud or something because it's dark on one side, light on the other. So I love clouds, and I always like looking at different colored ones. So there'll probably be parts of that picture and parts of this picture, and we'll just see where it goes. So I think Cindy, you just mentioned the rule of thirds. So put your horizon line at this point on probably the lower third, and we'll have the lake below that. We'll have the bluffs and the Sugar Loaf above it. The only thing I don't like about when I did this one is if Sugar Loaf is my main subject, I have it right in the middle. And that's probably not the best spot for it. So I might move Sugar Loaf a little bit more over into this quadrant on this picture and have a little bit more room for the sunset and then the sunrise. That will kind of be in the upper left quadrant. and the lake and reflections will just automatically put the rest of the picture down, or the other kind of subject matters in the other two lower quadrants. So that's just the rule of thirds. And let's see. So my horizon line with the lake is pretty decent. I had it a little high. And I think when I did this one, I put a piece of tape across there and did my bluffs above it. And it's always hard when you put that piece of tape on. It feels like you have it way down too low, but it's the upper edge that you need to look at for what's going to be your horizon line. So find your 1/3 maybe, and put, if you wanted to put a piece of tape across here, it'll actually feel like your tape is very low on your picture. I might as well just do that so we can see it. If I can find the end of my tape. So if my thirds are about here, I need to make sure that the top edge of my tape is there. And then when I look at it, it feels like the tape is really low in the picture, but it really probably could even still go a little bit lower. So I'm going to go lower than my first instinct says to tell me, and see how that feels this time, because I always end up going too high. So if we start at the very top, I'm going to say a lot of times when you're doing a painting, it's nice to do you almost frame the outside of it with darker colors or trees or something like that. It kind of makes it look like a vignette where it just kind of fades out. So I like to put a little bit of the darker blue up the top. And then I'm going to probably I should probably map out where my Sugar Loaf and stuff is. So I'm going to use my light green. And if I want Sugar Loaf over here, it's going to have to come up about like that, and then the bluff next to it. Sugar Loaf kind of comes down a ways. And then there's also kind of the other bluffs, which are downriver a little ways, but they're further away. So just kind of somewhat mapping out where I want different things to go. And I'm using my light green so that if I don't like it exactly in that spot, it won't be so difficult to clear to cover up. So can you guys see my light green in the camera? Okay. I don't want to put really dark lines in there with that. So that leaves me a lot of room for a sunrise in here, and Sugar Loaf, obviously. If you want to put the little rock in there, do it in a light color. So then I can pretty much go to doing some clouds and sky type things. So let's say probably, if you want to do a cloud, here's a good thing. If you want to do light fluffy clouds, trace around them first and leave those areas. You can either put white in there or just leave it and not put anything in there. So we can come back to that. So then when you're coloring, when you're putting that first layer of blue down, it's going to be, just kind of go around those areas. And I'm not going to go all the way down to the horizon line because I want to add more color into the lower section. So I'll just get a little bit of blue, the light blue in there for a base color. And then one of the things I found with, if you're doing sunrises and sunsets, is to actually, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can actually take your white crayon. I make sure you clean it because I get it all different kind of colors on there because I use it as a blending color. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm actually going to put a layer of white on, which I know you can't see, but that's going to be my first layer or my under layer for where the actual sun is, and that'll help me keep that section of my painting the lightest and brightest. And you could do the same and actually just put down a layer of white in your clouds. So remember, your first layer that goes down with your oil pastels is really what we call a base coat. And it's more than determining the correct color, it's determining the correct light versus dark. So if you wanted something quite dark, but you're going to do it a color later, you could put black down and then bring your other colors over it. And the black is going to really deepen those colors. Same thing if you want to really lighten the colors you have and go pastel, you can put a white base coat under it. Or sometimes, depending on the shades that I'm going to use, I might put the, I don't know what they call this, pale orange. And as I was doing this set last week, I realized I have 2 pale oranges, and I don't know which set I got this out of, because I don't think you guys have 3 oranges. I have an orange, a salmon pink, and a pale orange. So I have a number of different sets that kind of get lumped together, and sometimes I'm not sure which ones came out of it. So I think the ones you have to work with are the pale orange and the orange in that set. But that salmon pink was a really kind of a nice color. So, so since I want my sunrise to still be a light color, but it's going to be more in those orange and pink hues, I'm going to put my base layer, and I might actually even put a little bit of glow behind Sugar Loaf. And that's kind of my first. Since it's sunrise, my details, like my hills, are actually still kind of dark. So I'm going to go with my darker green as my base coat in there. And I may end up adding some browns and even little bits of blacks and stuff to that. And I don't know, I might even color in Sugar Loaf the same color as the sky. We'll fix that up later. All right, so just starting to get that base coat in, and I put it on pretty lightly, so I don't really have enough color to blend in there. But you can go back over then with your light blue and start blending that line between the light blue and the dark blue, putting a little bit more wax or oil, whatever it is, on the paper, and blending that outside line of dark blue into the color you have. And I've found sometimes if I go kind of in circles and different directions with my crayon, I can kind of move some of the colors. Once you get them on the paper, you can kind of draw them out into other areas a little bit if you get enough on there. So that's the probably number 2 concept with oil pastels. Probably the 2 big words are layering and blending. So I'm going to go about halfway down my clouds with my light blue here. And then in order to start blending my light blue towards the oranges in my sunrise, I'm actually going to put some white over my light blue and so I have a lighter blue. So I kind of have 3 or 4 tones of blue there. So always seems to be a little bit of a glow in the sky where the colors change, where they meet. So I find if I keep it pretty light colored to start with, that really helps blend those colors together. And at this point, I probably am pulling some of my blues down into the light orange peachy colors, because I'm going to kind of blend them anyway. And I tend to go horizontally for the most part when I'm coloring with a sky. One of the things that I did notice on my image, my photo image that I was looking at was that it has kind of those streaks of almost like, I don't know what you call it, the sun rays, I guess. So I might try some of that over the blues with the peach. And then obviously you would move in the direction that you want that line to look like it's moving. So that's kind of fun to add something a little bit different in there. And I actually think that a little bit more white and maybe some yellow in those rays would brighten them up a little bit. Especially maybe down here closer to the sun. So, and sometimes I just do narrow streaks of color and blend it all together. It's not really a right or wrong there, so just play with it and see. Then you can always go back over it a little bit more with your blue. Oops, and or your white as well. So in my image that I'm looking at, there's more yellow tones right above the sun. And it actually kind of moves to some darker colors around the edges. I think I'm going to bring my dark blue down both sides just a little bit. And just to kind of help remember that it's so early in the morning that it still has some darkness to the edges of your vision. The other thing I think with clouds is you could kind of come in with your finger after you've blended some of the blues and stuff and just kind of swirl it over the edges. Soften up your edges because clouds don't seem to have always really well-defined. Sometimes they have a well-defined edge. And sometimes your clouds they're maybe darker along the bottom. So I'm going in with my gray to put some cloud shadows in. And I'm just going to kind of blend those up almost in a swooping line, I guess, kind of just to make it look like there's shape to it. And there's other spots within your clouds you could put some dark spots where it kind of goes off into the distance. Clouds are one of those things that just really intrigue me. And I think that it's really a great thing just to pull up some pictures, either ones you've taken yourself with your phone or, you know, any random one you see online, and kind of just look at it and see where the shadows are. I'm going to highlight my streaks a little bit by putting a little bit of darker blue next to it. See what that does. And I really wish I had something a little more pink here. So if you have a pink, feel free to add some pink to maybe your edges a little bit. Obviously you can get a pink by doing a red and white. So since I already have kind of a light base color in there, I'm going to go ahead and put some red in there, and then all of that sky color, I'm going to try to blend it with the white crayon to keep it as light as possible. And then I kind of get those, all those streaks of the warm tones, the reds, the oranges, the yellows, and into pinks. And you could do a little bit of a purple tone, and I have found that a little bit of the light blue mixed with red and blended with white is probably one of your best ways to get a purpley look with this set. I think the hardest thing is when you're only putting a little bit of color down, is that it kind of leaves streaks. You know, you can see those lines, and those lines are hard to blend out. So I might come back in with the red, and I'm just going like super light, but trying to cover the whole thing kind of evenly. There, we're getting a little bit more of a purpley tone. And I always struggle with this when I'm trying to make a purple, and it never quite looks the way I want it to. And then later I go back and look at the painting and think, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. So sometimes I know I get too critical when I'm actually working on something. So it helps to, for me, it helps to step away and come back another time. So then I basically just keep playing with my edges and blending my colors together where I want it to be a smooth transition between the colors. And I did get plenty of white down for my sun, but I should probably still go back in and add a yellow. I don't know why, but we always think yellow is kind of what the color of the sun is. And since I want to keep it bright in where the sun is, I'm going to keep going back to blending that definitely with my white crayon. So there's really no right or wrong in your sunrise colors. Great place to play with, see how many different crayons you can use in one area. And maybe you get a lot of crayon on the paper and you go back and you do your blending with your yellow. And of course, I think clouds often aren't white and gray, but there's just little tiny bits of color in them. So if you wanted your whites to have just a faint pink hue to it, or maybe some yellows in it, since we put that, I put that white kind of base color down for my clouds, you can definitely add some colors to your clouds. I always feel like this is kind of like finger painting, getting the color down on my paper and then just playing with it a little bit. My under edges of my clouds aren't as well defined as I wanted. So I'm going to make them darker with my gray. So you might have noticed there I put a little blue down, the dark blue, kind of because I want this to be a pretty dark gray, but I don't want it to be black. And then I blended it out with my gray crayon. So probably the hardest part for me with, oops, that wasn't the one I wanted in there. Fingernail, we'll take some of that off. And you didn't see me scrape it off, right? The hardest thing for me with the oil pastels is that it's not great for details. And I always feel, you know, it's just kind of my habit is to go back in and make everything more detailed. So probably, if you just have to do lots of detail, oil pastel isn't the best way to do it. So just remember, you're just kind of getting an impression on the paper, and it's more the ideas. The person who's viewing it has to use their imagination a little bit. My mother-in-law painted some incredible oil paintings of these like sunburst rays coming up out of the clouds and stuff, and they are huge, like 2 feet by 3 feet, and super detailed. But this is not the right medium to do that super detailed with. So get the idea down there. All right, I should probably move on. I'll get stuck in my sunrise. I am going to use some brown, especially in these furthest away hills. And once I get that brown in there and it's kind of a base color, you can add both of your greens and even yellows in there, and some black if you want, to kind of mix it all together and get a nice deep greenish tone. And if I was actually looking at a photo of that had been taken from Lake Winona there, I might be more detailed in the actual shape of these hills. So you can always do that. Pull up a picture, or better yet, go down to the park and take a picture yourself. Let's see, so if the sun is coming out behind something, you're not going to be able to see the top edge really well or with much detail because the sun's going to be too bright there. So I'm going to add some blacks in with my browns there. And there might be just a little kind of glow at the top of the bluff edge. So we can go with some lighter color there. So that's my furthest away and probably the darkest part of my painting. And remember, if you want to make it darker, it's always easier to come back in later and darken it some more. It's easier to go darker than it is to go lighter. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of the lightest orange kind of on this face of Sugar Loaf, because I think from where I'd be standing taking this picture, a little bit of the sun might be actually hitting that face of Sugar Loaf. So I might want to keep that probably the brightest, lightest in my greens. And then I'm going to move into some darker colors. And then back over to this other one again is kind of out, getting to the edge of your view. So that's going to be darker over here again. I guess I'm not doing a good job of getting down all the way to my tape edge there. So the other thing you can look at is this bluff kind of is sitting in front of Sugar Loaf from where we're standing. So there would actually be a shadow behind that bluff a little bit. So that would probably be the darkest spot on the Sugar Loaf face. So there, I got a bunch of light, dark, and kind of crazy variety there. But then I think if I go back over the whole thing and blend with my dark green, the dark green is really the color that I want in there. And the other colors underneath just kind of set that light and dark, whichever whatever I need in there. So I think because of the boldness of the way the oil pastels work, I kind of feel like when you're working with them, you want to really make the most of that and like almost overdo it in your paintings and have everything be really lots of lights and lots of darks and lots of contrast in it. And also from what I've seen other artists online using them, sometimes it's not even like you're not even using the quote realistic color, and they're putting all kinds of colors in things that sometimes I would never think to combine some of those colors. And oh, here's another example. A lot of times if you wanted to make something darker and you were in your green tones, if you add blues in your dark areas, that makes a really good color in your shadows. Then it just kind of, I don't know, it really blends well with the greens and gives a little bit more depth to the color. All right, I did mostly the brown and the pale orange to do Sugar Loaf, and I kind of it's almost like from this angle I can see the front face of it, which is mostly triangular, and then the side face. So I'm going to do the side face darker, and I'm going to make sure I have a good light coat of the light orange on the front face, and then I will do a little bit of brown over that. Boy, I don't even feel like I have to do too much changing with that. I might just put the black on the furthest back edge away from the sun. And I almost feel like the colors in my sunrise that I put there are making it hard to see Sugar Loaf as much of the main theme as I want it to be. So I'm going to bring a little bit of blues around my Sugar Loaf just to kind of give a line there where you can see the Sugar Loaf. So something that has a little bit more contrast than my sunrise colors did. Yeah, I'm kind of liking that. How are you guys feeling with your bluffs in there? I'm gonna bring all this all the way down to my tape line. I didn't do a very good job of that. All right, I am going to pull up my tape because I could just keep messing with this all day long. My horizontal tape I'm going to do so we can play in the water a little bit. And as far down as I felt like that tape was, it is not too far down. I like it where it is. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to go any further up. Okay, so to get into some water, we can do some silhouettes or you know, you might see the bluffs down here reflected in it. You might see the sun and kind of that ray from the sun. So I'm going to start with my light green again, and just to get some shapes in. But if this bluff was mirror imaged in the water, it would be kind of there. And my mirror image of Sugar Loaf would go out like that. And since my sun is right here, I'm going to use yellow. I'm going to actually put a pretty bold line down, and that wasn't exactly in line with it, but it was close. Just to remind me that that's where I want the sun's reflection, the most of it there. Then in the water, I don't know, you know, I think because it's water, I think I'm going to put a base coat of blue in, even where the bluffs are, because the bluffs reflected in the water aren't going to be as exactly true to color as they would be above the water. So I'm going to kind of do this whole thing in a little bit of blue. And the water actually is a lot darker than the sky when you look at pictures. So I'm going to do more of my dark blue in the water than I have in the sky. And I'm just doing kind of light layers with that so I can blend them. And again, that idea of a vignette, it's darker around the edges. And I might even put a little bit of black right up along the horizon line here, or the water line, where those bluffs are reflected in my water, because I want that to be pretty dark. It is actually, in the photo I'm looking at, the water gets to be a purplish blue. So I might even try doing a light layer of reds in there. Just kind of getting some, just get some color in there. In the same way I did with the black for the shadow, I'll probably also make some browns in there. And I might blend a little bit with my gray. So I'm not adding a whole lot more color. Kind of an ugly color, but sometimes the shadows and the reflections of shadows that we see aren't really pretty. Okay, so the colors of the water where I want more of the purplish tones, I'm going to blend that with my white crayon, just because that's the best way I've found to get the idea of purple with this set of crayons. Oops. Must have been coloring too hard. The tip of my white just broke off. And then, because I've got some darks already going in what would be the reflection of the bluffs, then I'm going to go back in and change it to the color I want, which is a little bit more of a greenish tone. And that'll differentiate the reflection and the water. So I'm just going to keep layering some colors in there, some browns, and maybe even a little bit more black. But in the end, it's kind of a bluish green because it is on the water. I think I'm having a hard time getting the very bottom edge of my water to be dark enough. So I'm going to go ahead and put some black in there. I don't want a whole lot of black in my water, but I can blend it out a little bit. I guess that's the other thing about having a larger set of crayons is you have more like light blues and dark blues. You just have a little bit more variety of what colors you can use to darken things. Okay, I really kind of want my sun ray here to be a little bold in one spot, but since it's in the water and I kind of want blues on either side of it, I'm going to take my blue and I'm going to kind of like work it into the sun rays and try to pull them out into that, you know, the waves look of water. And then I'll probably go back over that with whites too and do the, just kind of make it look wavy, I guess is what it really is. And I always seem to go back to my white crayon for blending some of this spots together. You know, water, when there's light reflecting off of it, is going to have streaks of white. And sometimes if you put a pretty obvious streak in over a dark spot, it really gives you that, you kind of appreciate the fact that it's water, it's something that's reflecting the light. I'm kind of happy with the way that's coming along. Here's some scratching and some busy people. Are you all having luck? Any problems or anything you don't like? You can take your ebony pencil or your drawing pencil and sharpen up the line where there's some shadows and stuff. You can be a little bit more detailed with that than you could with the bigger crayons. So that's a good place to go back in and add a little bit more detail. Maybe even just a tiny bit around Sugar Loaf to give it, you know, to really give it some distinction. Crisp up the edges maybe. Clean them up. And maybe your outside edge too. So what I did the last time I did this basic view, Sugar Loaf is great, the sunset is great and all of that, but for a lot of times, especially if you're a photographer, in order to give a sense of perspective to something like this, you really need something that comes out of your foreground and also kind of what we call frames the picture a little bit. So if I'm imagining I'm standing down in Lake Park, and maybe this view is down by Huff Street, kind of over by Lake Street or wherever from that corner, there's a lot of trees in the park. So if I was standing right on the water's edge, there might actually even be, you know, some cattails or other long grassy things right along the shoreline. And another thing that's awesome to put in sunrises and stuff would be a couple of birds. And so really all you need is the kind of a V. That adds a lot of life to a picture. I mean, you could put something like a duck down in the foreground too, if you wanted to. But I like having a tree branch kind of come. And actually what this does also is if there was some part of your clouds or something that you really weren't super happy with, if you get a branch line coming across it, you'll never notice the other part that you didn't like so well. So just a faint suggestion of a tree in there. And you can do leaves with the dotting, pounding some greens on. There was something else I was just going to suggest. Oh, this was something I saw the other day. I did on another painting. This, I loved how this worked. I took my white paint pen and I got the ink flowing really well. I'm trying to think where I want to put it in this one. An airplane trail. So I kind of did a white line that got a little bit wider, and it kind of looks like an airplane flew through your picture as you were snapping your photo. So that's a great use of your white paint pen. The other thing you can do to add a little bit of last minute life to it, and I would have probably do a lot more leaves. You can do light green, dark green. You could make them fall colors for all you want. Through this area where my sun is, I could put some streaks of white that really look like the top of a little ripple in the water, especially in that area where you want it the lightest. You can also continue those out into other parts of your water. And you could highlight some of your clouds with some white paint. You might have it really white, but for some reason the acrylic paint adds a more opaque white to it. It gives it a little bit of three-dimensional feeling almost. So the picture of Sugar Loaf and Lake Winona is a beautiful picture, but there's lots of things we can do to it to just give it some life. It's not just about it's not just the lake, and it's not just Sugar Loaf that are beautiful. So I think I need some more leaves. And I'm going to do my leaves in a bunch of different colors. I could probably even put like some dark browns and some blacks in there because, again, this is, as the sun's coming up, the stuff in the foreground is pretty dark. So if you do some black in there for definition, you can tap pretty lightly. Black shows up much better than the other colors. Well, let's put a little blue in, see what that does. And I was thinking browns in my leaves too. Except I can't find my brown. I am always setting my crayons down and then I can't find them. So I'm better off if I try to keep them all in my hand. So I guess the lesson with the tree is if there's anything that's not your favorite parts of the painting, put something in the foreground that goes over it. Now I see some of you kind of sitting back and looking at your painting like, do I like this? Do I like that? How do you feel about it? Is it one of those that needs to sit and kind of marinate in your mind a little bit before you pull up the tape and finish it? We got a little bit of time for some comments. How are you feeling about that? Getting that much done in 1 hour?
I think this was the hardest one yet.
That's why we didn't start with this one.
Yeah, good point.
There's a little bit more detail in this than the other ones we've done. And that's where I find the difficulty with oil pastels, is when you start to add more highlights and more details and stuff, how to keep it from getting out of control.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else feel the same way?
Yep. So this is my second time doing this because I did it a long time. The first time when you did the other oil pastel class, and I like my Sugar Loaf better this time, but I still struggle on getting Sugar Loaf in particular to look like Sugar Loaf. Because it is hard, because you can't do a lot of detail, but yet you need it to be the right shape, and I struggle with the oil pastels to get it the right shape.
It is pretty small in the overall size of this picture and a different color than everything else. So that is definitely one of the difficult things with something, because Sugar Loaf is iconic. We've all seen it a million times, even if we don't look at it. And if it's not right, you just know it. One of the things I would do is I would take or pull up some pictures of Sugar Loaf and look at the proportion of how much rock is there compared to the size of the bluff that's left. Did you guys put tree branches in or something in that corner? I was going to say, you could actually do more with the pastels on a tree branch and add browns too. And you could go back in with your paint marker and highlight the top edge of some of your branches where the sun is hitting it from behind.
Do you use maple spirits very often?
I don't. I've tried just regular like vegetable oil, and
Yeah.
I don't know, it almost feels like I'm just taking a lot of the oil pastel back off the paper, and what I'm left with is the stain underneath it, which is great because then you can go build up more layers again. And it really depends on what kind of paper you're working with. My piece of paper that I do mine on, and probably why it seems to take you guys a little bit longer than me, is because my paper is actually a little bit smaller than the piece you're working on. So I'm not covering as much ground. But if your paper has a little bit of texture to it, some of those things like adding a little oil or something to it are really effective. When you're on a really smooth, shiny paper, it's a little harder. It has been harder for me.
Because I tried it. I just used canola oil.
Yeah.
On the tip of Q-tip, and it seemed to work all right. So I thought, oh, I wonder if you use it very often.
I
But
haven't.
apparently-
I'm just too lazy to get it out. Or
okay.
I'm more likely to tip it over and spill it somewhere. So I'm probably safer with just the crayons.
Okay.
But there are, I think it's with the oil pastels. Jamie, do you remember, was there blending solutions that you can buy?
I don't know if I've ever seen that. I've tried olive oil, and I like it on sometimes, like, just because it helps get in the cracks on the mixed media paper that we that's in the kits and stuff. I also don't get it very often just because it's one more step. But I've tried it too, and I kind of liked it to help blend. You know, if you want it to a smoother look, or if you're having problems getting the things to go in the cracks.
Okay. So,
but I don't think I've ever seen a solution.
What weight paper is this that we're using? Like, it looks.
Yeah,
it feels like 90 pound. Do you know?
You know what? I can see if I can look it up really quick. What I ordered.
Oh, okay. Because I do watercolor.
I've ordered 2 different kinds, and so, but I'm pretty sure I know which one you guys have. So let me.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
All right.
It'll take me a second though.
I think watercolor paper works. I've also heard. Well, I mean, they do actually make
media, but
yeah, mixed media paper is what a lot of people use because it's kind of heavy enough. It has enough tooth to the paper. They do make an actual oil pastel paper. I don't think I've ever actually used that. My cardstock that I have, I just have a pile of this paper.
Yep, it is 90 pound. It's 90 pound.
90. I thought
it actually is watercolor paper is what we're actually using. So it's watercolor bulk paper. And it says for wet and dry media, 90 pound.
Oh, okay. I was taking a guess, and I thought this feels like 90 pound weight to me. Yeah.
So it's just probably, I mean, whatever you use for watercolors works really well with this medium too. And if you have that weight paper, then it's much easier to do like oil or something as a blending solution because the paper will hold up to it.
Oh, see, I even have 300 pound weight paper, but I don't know what that would look like. It'd be kind of bumpy, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, the first time we did this, I think the paper was a little bit, I don't remember what it was, Lisa, but do you remember it was a little too bumpy, don't you think?
It had too many little divots in it, and it was really hard to get the wax or the crayon into all of the holes or the texture in the paper itself.
Yeah, that would be paper that's too heavy. Like 300, I can't imagine being able to use that. Maybe for water or something, I don't know.
So mine that I have is a really actually quite heavy piece of cardstock. It's almost as heavy as like a cracker box or something that you would get crackers in. It's pretty stiff. But it's not quite as smooth as like that kind of cardboard, but it's not as textured as the multimedia paper. So if I want something that I really want to have a really smooth gradient in the blending between the colors, I find it's easier to blend it and smear it on a little bit smoother paper. But if you want to build up deeper layers of more colors, then your paper has to have a little bit more texture to it because it's the texture that grabs a hold and allows you to put more pastel on the paper. So I recommend just, especially if you have other papers and things at home, just try, even if you just go back and try some blend, red into orange and see how much you need to blend the colors together. Because I do find that there are certain papers that I don't like working on. It's almost like too much work to get enough pastel on there to blend it together. I kind of see, Jamie, you're shaking your head too.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I probably didn't really talk about too much, a lot of people, they say it's tissue paper, but sometimes I think it's because I watch videos of people like in England or India or something, and they call things different than what we do. So, they're what they call tissue paper might be what we call a Kleenex, but they will take a square of, and I suppose what we call tissue paper, the wrapping paper type stuff would work really well. They take a square and they fold it down, and then somehow or other they like make triangles by folding stuff back, and they get a blending stump that you have a pretty stiff point on, and you can use that to blend your colors rather than your fingers. I find when I do that, it scrapes a lot of the pastel back off of the paper, and so it ends up kind of just staining the paper. So again, I think that might work better on different types of paper.
Okay.
But I've kind of wondered if
I was going to say, have you ever used your Stumpy?
No, I was going to say I should try it with the tortillon, because I have in the package of the tortillons, I got to have one that's really quite large, but it comes to a nice point. And I think that would be really interesting to try, especially if you want to get into some more detailed corners and stuff. But I think for blending, I mean, you could actually even use the butt end of the tortillon where it's flat, and mix stuff around. A Q-tip too.
Q-tip before.
Q-tips?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And the Q-tip is kind of like a really stiff brush. I do like using the Q-tip if I use oil. I get the end of the Q-tip wet, and then I literally actually squeeze out the excess into a napkin. So there's just a tiny bit of oil on the Q-tip. It's not enough to really get your paper wet with the oil, but it's just enough that it softens the oil pastels a little bit and makes them slightly more liquidy than crayon kind of consistency. It's an interesting process to play with. Definitely don't want to use too much oil though. And I would guess you could probably use a paintbrush, and I'm thinking like a flat, like the flat square point ones that are something that's a little stiff, kind of short bristled, where if you dip that in a little bit of oil and wiped off the excess, you could swirl those colors around a little bit too. So that would actually be a really interesting technique to try. What would it work well on, or what makes it a great technique to use? I've also seen people take a palette knife from an oil painting and go back after the painting is done and scratch details into it, especially if you're doing animals or something and you want it to make it look like hair. You go back and scratch little tiny lines in. So you could do that on, say, like your Sugar Loaf, and your scratch lines could go up and down and kind of simulate trees. So you can add a little bit of texture with that. I did it once with just a paring knife out of my vegetable tool drawer. That was kind of cool. And anything, even a toothpick, that you could use to kind of scratch, because once you get the oil pastels layered on there, you can feel it. The paper's covered. So you could go back in and scratch off little bits of the pastel in certain places.